when paint failure happens, in this case, we're not going to blame the painter, right? Could say, oh, they didn't prepare this, the substrate properly. They didn't sand after they primed, or they didn't, they didn't use the right paint. They used a cheap paint from a box store or something. But really what's going on here is
Hi, I'm Brian, and I am a functional holistic wellness practitioner. In this series about sick house syndrome, we're going to be focusing in a very practical way about mold and mycotoxins. We can start off by looking at this chart. I've titled it Environmental Root Cause Tree. And at the top of it is this thing that I hold near and dear to my heart, which is this concept of mojo. Mojo is that life force, that energy. Some may like the term aura. It is that sense of purpose, that drive, the focus, the motivation, that part of us we miss. What's affecting that? What is taking that best version of ourselves and dragged it down? Well, the things that I like to focus on and the things that I specialize in is pathogens, carcinogens, and toxins. Through functional lab testing, we help to tease these things out, to kind of test, not guess, figure out where the hidden clues are to the things that are affecting our mojo. So under pathogens, we have bacteria, mold and mycotoxins, viruses, protozoa, and parasites. Some of these may be showing up in the gut, obviously. We see those a lot in the GI map test, right? We may even see some hints of mold like candida, which is a yeast. We see that in the GI map as well. We'll also see some hints in the organic acid test. We may see that hint of a yeast or candida as a colonized version of mold inside our bodies. Under bacteria, sometimes we want to look a little further, a little deeper for things like the Lyme disease and co-infections that we all hear about. Another way that we might look for mold in our bodies is through the mycotox panel from Vibrant Wellness. Next up, we've got carcinogens, that would be EMFs and AGEs. We want to look into EMFs in our home at some point in a different series. Toxins, we've got the total tox panel, which can look at not just molds, but also the things under this umbrella, which we're looking at heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides, plastics, and VOCs. And before we start, let's look at this brief disclaimer. Now let's get into our first topic, which is identifying a visible sign of mold in the home and then ordering tests online and immunolytics to analyze it. Now let's get started.
I am just coming at you today to talk about mold testing. I have a specific example in my own house that I've been afraid to deal with. And if you're in that camp, I'm just here to tell you, I feel you. It is very overwhelming to tackle this problem on your own. Even for someone like myself who has some knowledge about building biology and also about the mold testing, in our bodies, like the mycotox panel. But to do it on your own is extremely overwhelming because it just feels like there are so many details. If I mess this up, will it set me back? When you have like immunosuppression or any number of things like histamine intolerance or SIRS, which is, chronic inflammatory response syndrome. When your body goes haywire and when you have a bad day, it could set you back for up to a week sometimes, maybe even more. When nervous, don't want to rock the boat. I get that. But there is something to be said for taking some form of action, and that's what I'm here to do today. And I'm going to share it with you. So let me share with you a photo to start with. I'm going to share my screen. All right, this is in my closet. And my house isn't this bad usually. Like most of the areas in my house, it's not this obvious. But I have a corner. This is an exterior corner in a closet. And this is perfect because I have a assessment that I offer clients where you can go through your home and look for warning signs, things that will not cost you money. It just takes your time and your level of observation. You need to look for certain things, right? And so one of those things is paint peeling. When paint failure happens, in this case, we're not going to blame the painter, right? Could say, oh, they didn't prepare this, the substrate properly. They didn't sand after they primed, or they didn't use the right paint. They used a cheap paint from a box store or something. But really what's going on here is there is moisture drive through the wall, and when water becomes a vapor, it's smaller than air. And so when something's smaller than air, it can push through pretty much any substrate, unless it's some kind of, weather resistant barrier, or a vapor retarder. That's its sole purpose is to keep moisture from going like into a wall cavity, right? So this is an old home built in 1910, and what we end up with is we have warm air, warm, moist air. Us as inhabitants, as we breathe out, we have moisture in our bodies. So if this was in a bathroom, the bathroom was invented, it'd be even worse, right? So you have like a warm shower, and then the walls aren't insulated, and so you got to imagine that warm, moist vapor going into the wall cavity and then finding its way on the exterior plywood, or God forbid OSB, will end up with some form of mold growing on that cold condensed. Basically, what happens is that moisture, the vapor, gets becomes condensation, water droplets, and sometimes it can be so bad it's like a sheet of water over a surface, and it just sits there, and it doesn't have much, as we would call, drying potential. It doesn't have an opportunity to dry, so it's trapped in that cavity. It's dark. It's a prime opportunity for mold to grow. This is actually a blessing to see the mold growing on the inside, like in the living environment, because this is telling me something a little more than just failed paint. So if you have failed paint on the outside of your house, like think about where it is. Like if it's just one spot, is it near where you're sleeping? Like I've seen that before on my house before I sided it. I had a bedroom up against a wall, and the wall near where our heads were was there was, I guess we must have been mouth breathers, but basically what was going on is that vapor was driving through the wall and into and then onto that cold condensing surface, and it was basically causing the paint to fail on the siding. And a lot of painters and builders, they back prime the different pieces of wood to try to prevent that from happening. But if that's happening, it is a clue that the building science is missing something, right? There isn't a proper weather resistant barrier on the outside. There isn't some people use plastic. You shouldn't use plastic on the inside. They use like a smart vapor retarder that's on the inside. So what we have here is a situation where moisture hit that cold condensing surface. It became moist, and it was dark in here, and then it was basically the prime food for mold to grow. Now, the big question is, what kind of mold is this? I need to figure that out, right? So I'm just going to go through the process of testing. What I'm going to do is for this specific test, I am going to put a dish on the ground. It's like a Petri dish. And I'm also going to use a swab, cotton swab, to basically make it all dirty. I'm going to rub it back and forth across, these spores. And then I'm going to send them into the lab. Now, there's a couple of choices. There's a few choices, obviously, on who to send to. And there's a lot of disagreement in the industry about who to use. I want to keep things cost effective.
Hey, I really hope you're enjoying today's video. If you like what you see, please help me get my message out by hitting the like button, telling me what's on your mind in the comments, and subscribing by hitting that notification bell. And as always, there's lots of goodies down in the description. Thanks so much. Now let's get back to it.
I love immunolytics. I've used them once before. They test for 37,000 species of mold. Now, if we look at the one that the Shoemaker protocol is pushing, it is looking at, so it's called the ERMI test. Other people talk about the HERTSMI, but the ERMI is the highest on that list. ERMI's on its own is going to test for 36 types of mold, and the ERMI plus 3 obviously is 39. So just to do one room, it's $265 through this vendor, List Biotech. And I may do that just as sort of a learning process for myself. But I'm not loaded right now, and I just want to just kind of learn through the process. So I'm on Immunolytics website, and I'm starting here. Before I take a crowbar, which would obviously be the wrong thing to do, if I go and I take a crowbar to this right now, if I start, I take a paint scraper, I'm going to basically cause these mold spores to release what Evan Brand loves to call mold farts. That's the mycotoxins that, again, like vapor, they're smaller than air. They can pass through any substrate, most any substrate anyway. Their size is extremely small, and they will pass through mucous membranes, through the mucosal barrier, like in your sinuses. They'll get into your brain. So they'll cause all kinds of downstream effects in the body. So we don't want that. We want to protect ourselves. So someone like me, who's immunocompromised, who's had problems with histamine intolerance and even issues around, oxalates. Molds can create oxalates in the body, especially, candida as a secondary overgrowth. We want to basically protect against that. So that would be full body protection. We're talking about hazmat suit, tenting the area, creating a negative airspace with a fan, preferably not ourselves doing this work, right? If we have issues with our health, mold is a serious issue. I'm not here to fearmonger, but I'm just saying, like, this is the kind of thing that we really want to be really careful about, especially if we have children in our home. If we send those tiny little mycotoxins, floating around the space, the ones that we love are going to get exposed. We don't want that. So there's a right and a wrong way to do this, and we have to plan properly around it. So that would mean we have to tent the area with plastic. I would say at least 6 mil, probably 9 mil plastic, with zipper doors and a negative air, which means we're exhausting the air out of the space so that you can see that plastic basically, sucking in. So this is just a deterrent because I'm tempted. I want to take a crowbar. I want to get rid of this. My instincts are to protect myself, protect, the people I love from getting exposed to this. How long have I been exposed to this? Is this causing all the other issues in my body? You know, I have an eye surgery coming up in a couple of weeks, and I was wondering if this was causing that. This is a real problem affecting all of us. So I'm just here to say that it is overwhelming for anyone, even the people who know a little bit more about it or have learned a little bit more about it. To navigate this on your own is extremely tough to do. So I'm just going to show you one of the steps. So here we are. We're just doing our own self-assessment today. And I'm on the Immunolytics website, and I'm just going to click Shop Now. And if I wanted to do my whole house, which I have done quite a few rooms before, I could just use one of these quick start kits. But I'm going to do a custom kit today because I'm just talking about one room, small room, and mold plate testing. So here we've got a room, so I'm going to add it for a room. And then I was curious about my vehicle. I have a 2006 Toyota Tacoma. That would be kind of a nice, video for us to do together to go through that and see how to test for mold in our vehicle, and then maybe something we can do about it if we discover there's an issue. I suspect there's an issue. It's an old vehicle. And then visible mold and dust. So you saw in that photo, there's mold and look at that. It's in a corner, right? Corners are notorious. They have corner boards that are failing. You have improperly detailed barriers around, like the WRB, the weather resistant barrier that's around that corner can fail. You've got wind driven rain, up near the eaves. Squirrels. I've had squirrels living in my eaves or like in the fascia soffit. They'll eat the lead paint. They'll get right in there. You know what I'm saying? And they don't care. And they'll create holes in your house. And so when you have a good nor'easter come, it's driving that wind-driven rain into the space, down the corner, and water likes to cling to things as it comes down. It loves those corners. They call that surface tension. When water follows a surface, even if it's horizontal, it will actually follow horizontal surfaces, and then it will go down. So it's using gravity, but it also, just watch water someday. Think about water. Think like water, basically, is how to sleuth this out. So visible mold, I'm getting a swab. That's going to be another $36. And something I wanted to make you aware of, and this has been talked about in the interviews with the founder of Immunolytics, Highly recommended if you get onto the betterhealthguy.com. He's interviewed him a couple of times. Plates with no analysis, $3. So basically, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check to see if the work I did in my basement had any effect. I've got two, air filters. I love them. I would recommend them any day. And I have a industrial size dehumidifier in my basement because I've suspected that's my biggest problem until I seen this corner in the closet. So yeah, so let's just basically we're going to use ground advantage for the shipping, and then I'm going to say add to cart. All right. They gave me two mold plates, which this room is extremely small. I'm not going to need that. So I just basically reduced it to one. And the mold swab, $36, plate without analysis, $3. I could do a couple of rooms, maybe. I'm going to add it. I have a sink room I've been curious about. I'm going to test that too. I'm just going to see if anything grows in there. Because I saw in my first test, it was like years ago. I did that room. I put a dish in there, and it did show me some results. There was some mold in that room. So how are we doing? Is it still a problem? Be good to know. And then there's the shipping. And so update cart. And there's my total 105. Just double checking. Not bad. Proceed to checkout. And I'm gonna step out at this point. You know how to do this. Pretty much anything you ever bought online has a form like this. I'm gonna put in my credit card. I'm gonna submit it. It's gonna arrive at my house, and I'll meet you back when that comes in. I'm gonna stop sharing now. So let me know your thoughts and questions about that. And we're going to see what this test has to show. The immunolytics test for 37,000 species. I can't wait to see what it is. I'm also going to be running at least a mycotox panel from Vibrant Wellness. I may do the total tox panel because I'm curious. What else am I getting exposed with? So basically, the total tox panel is the mycotox, but it adds other things like VOCs and heavy metals and all those other things that we get exposed to every day, like microplastics. The other thing about it is I think I am also going to be doing a My Mycolab test, which it looks at the immune system response. So basically, have I created, do I have sort of immune system reactivity to certain types of molds? The founder of that has stated that the immune system testing for mold in your body is more accurate and more reliable than urine testing. I'm going to do both, and I'm going to basically supply my results. I'm going to do the urine testing with a provocation because I believe that mold causes the liver to become sluggish in its excretion of the mycotoxins. It not only affects the immune system, but it affects the detoxification systems of the body. So let's see what those two tests do, kind of side by side, and then I can basically say, yeah, the Vibrant Wellness panels are good to go. I have a clinical advisor that I work with. She's very knowledgeable. She's worked with thousands of people. She's excellent. She's amazing. And I consult with her with clients, the case notes to talk about how we might move forward with a case. And, she likes these tests. She works on them and has had no problems with them. She does a gentle provocation. And so I would do the same thing.
Hey, so if you want to see more from me, be sure to look for the next video in this series or others suggested for my channel. And be sure to share a link with someone you love that could use the power. You're the hero in this story, and I've got nothing but gratitude.